Thank you again, and we'll get started here. We're gonna the last session here talk about best practices and try to throw some real life examples. So this is actually we were having another speaker here, but he actually got promoted and he's not available because of that, which is great actually. They are using our product set. It's a government agency. Again, we kind of not going to mention the actual name, but they are happy, using our product set. There's other, of course, government customers as well. So this example, as an example, is a Bad Pickle Plant. Okay, so if you think about it, what they do is they have field inspectors that prepare for inspections. They go and they travel to the pickle plant. They, again, arrive there and they look at the pickles. They inspect the pickles. And then they collect samples, they get results, and if there's a problem, they have to, again, give, completed forms back to the plant. They send the samples to the lab, they complete the report, and they analyze the pickles, and if there are problems, they do, supervisory compliance and reviews to make sure that it follows regulations. And if something happens that's wrong, there could be some, regulatory compliance letters sent out, or plants get shut down. Okay, so this is an example: bad pickle plant. Another bad pickle story. It could also come from outside, so it gets imported in. Right, so it's not a U.S. based plant, but imported in, and then they seems to be okay. They do again the customs, looking into it. They look at it at the port. They again, it gets unloaded. They take a look at it, again, screening it in customs. They have to take different samples because some are bad samples. And then they go to the warehouse, pick it up. They do some more sample collection, etc. Similar process at the end where they look at it, and if it's not compliant, then they have to actually witness the destruction of it. That way you don't get sick eating pickles, right? For example. So if you look at that example, they're looking at an integrated solution that provides the capability of having the different swim lanes and roles, being able to, of course, either import it or collect it locally. They want to collect the sample. They want to be able to send the sample to the lab. They want to, they want to not only automate this process, they want to be able to track this process. They want to make sure that nothing slips, because if something slips, then obviously you get a bad pickle, right? Bad pickles. One bad pickle, okay. Lots of bad pickles, a little bit of a problem, right? So that's an example. And if you look at it, the technical integration, uses a layered infrastructure, because it's not just a process, it's also a lot of legacy systems. It's a lot of outside interfaces potentially, et cetera, and as well as a business integration side, because they want to be able to support multiple stakeholders in multiple organizations. So you've got compliance, you've got lawyers, you've got the lab, you've got a lot of different stakeholders involved, to include external stakeholders that could be the government, right? Because bad pickles, lots of bad pickles, escalates to a pretty high level. Right, as an example. So, of course, you have those different users, and they have to have important use of technology. So when we looked at that and we did lessons learned, we actually did also separately a proof of concept to, I guess, not just espouse technology, but how shall we say, best practice. So how have you heard of Agile? Extreme programming? Have you? Okay. So Agile development and extreme programming, of course, extreme programming is just a subset for Agile, right? But it makes people uncomfortable. Okay, right? Especially developers. What do you mean I don't have a 20,000-page use case document that I can meet exactly? No, not going to happen. If you're doing Agile, if you wait, a year for a 20,000-page use case document, then you're wrong, because basically the business changed already. Done, right? So you've got to be in uncomfort zone. You've got to have basic requirements that you build a basic execution model with and adjust very rapidly. Developers, don't like that. You're rating me on how well I produce results, right? Yeah, let's talk about expectation management, right? So when we look at that, it's about people, process, and technology again. And if you look at, from a people's perspective, you want to empower the team to adopt agile development, and you want to establish governance. So again, it's expectation management, right? It's like, I know you're not going to get 100%. It's okay. Don't freak out. Developers freak out all the time. Okay? You got to be able to be patient with them. So don't freak out. You want to have quick win teams, tiger teams. You want to create rapid response teams. You may have to create multiple teams so that they, work together. Like you could do parallel development, integration, process. There could be different activities. Leverage and train resources, obviously, and communicate those plans and goals to all the stakeholders so the expectations are set correctly, right? No, you're not going to get users all the colors that you want, okay? In the first run, it's going to have the basics. It's going to work, right? And not have the wrong expectations. Okay, our video.
Oh, there we go.
No, but the video is off. I think I have to reboot the.
Oh, well, you're doing that. So this whole thing about agile, right? And we've got a customer down in Florida, basically, who they one of the things we tell people is choose the right process, something that's not too complex, right? But what they chose was something that was more complex, but it had clearly the business benefit and business buy-in, right? And they involved the business from the start in basically the whole process. And what they would do is every day, as they got into this thing, they meet with business, they review where they were, they then have a plan how to take it forward. The developers would go back, they would do more work. The next day they'd have something else to show. So it was iterative on a daily basis. And what he said was, it really that you could see that they were becoming more and more engaged in the whole project, from the business side, because they could see that this was developing to the solution to their problem, right? As well as from the IT side, although there was the uncomfortableness that Linus was speaking of, it certainly helped them to see that they were connecting in at a level that was really going to solve the problem that these guys were talking about. So there's certainly a lot of benefit there, and the tools. The good news is the tools enable you to do that iterative type of work, because we're dealing at a higher level here with the model than you would be if you were, strictly staying in code development.
We're almost there.
Almost there?
We're
Okay.
almost back online.
Yeah. Well, it varies all according to the customer. And this is something we were talking about earlier, I think, in one of our side conversations. There's so much about BPM and all technology in terms of how you deploy it and use it that is social, that is, according to the culture of the company. Yeah, these guys at one point were able to do daily rev of certain parts of it, right? Now, they didn't do that throughout the whole project, but you're right. Some companies, Agile means, a week, or it means 2 weeks, or whatever it means, it needs to fit in, but it's something that if you can, it's a heck of a lot better to benefit from that, increased interaction, for all the reasons.
Okay, great. So exactly right. It depends on the organization, and it's true. You know, sometimes it's too fast, but you have to judge that based on the customer and or on the organization needs. So again, you know, we looked at people. You look at process. How can you streamline the process? Obviously, it goes from the vision and scope and the goals, and then optimizing processes before just technology and data. So yes, you do optimize technology and data. That's an important part, but you have to also look at the process. And process-centric view, where before, if you look at a lot of applications in the past, it's been data-centric. So again, you have to change that mindset. And then technology, obviously, leverage what you have. So if you bought a BPM suite, how can you leverage the most out of it? Now, you have to make this business choice. Maybe you use other components too, but at least look at what you bought in your toolkit before saying, oh, we're going to customize the hell out of everything. Use my language. But that could actually cause you problems. Okay, in certain cases, because you're kludging together different technologies, like why not try to leverage the most out of what you have as a package? And then, you know, we try to promote that as well, obviously. So you also consider additional capabilities, and you deliver incremental value with that agile approach. So you look at each one of these. This is, you know, right here. This is people. You look at establishing that executive committee. You look at cross-functional, cross-disciplinary groups, center of excellence, working committees, etc. Obviously, those quick win teams, small focused teams, frontline professionals that are looking and have experience with the actual work that's being done. Subject matter experts are essential as part of this. And then from the IT perspective, the ones that are able to be flexible and change with the changing requirements and deliver those near-term, you know, value by, you know, bringing those solutions out, you know, quickly, you know, and rapidly and with less risk. So, and you also have to do, of course, training the resources, and there are different types of resources. So this is no, you know, standard set, right? You can also say that, you know, some of these have different labels, different terms, but basically there are different types of, you know, users. You have the sponsors, you have leads, you have facilitators, you may have business end users. You may not have all of these within your organization. Some, like you say, you may have some developers that act as business analysts, right? So they could play multiple roles. But these, you know, we establish kind of the generic, you know, skill sets that are needed in how they kind of match in an organization. And of course, communication. So different stakeholders need different communication. Obviously, users, a little different communication than you would have your IT staff, etc. And being able to have that set up so that you can effectively move the project along, keep everybody happy and on the same page. Very important to have communication. And then, of course, when you go through from a process standpoint, defining the vision and the scope. So again, think big, start small, move fast, right? So yes, this is an enterprise solution that will be your backbone infrastructure for your future infrastructure for end-to-end business processes. But you want to then start small and build, you know, building blocks, right, to get you where you need to go. Of course, focus on optimizing business process before technology. So look at, you know, your pick of your first process or first couple processes and say, what is going to get me the most bang for the buck? What is a low-hanging fruit? So you weigh your bang for the buck with complexity. When you start your first process, we actually went through this exercise. I think that's probably in your training, you know, regime. If you go through one of those or some other training source, it's on your business analyst process side, right? So you do your chart where you say, you know, high complexity, low complexity, high return, low return. You kind of map out where those processes are, and you do a trade-off, right? You say, well, you know, this has huge bang for the buck, incredibly complex. You know it's going to take you a long time to build that process. Meanwhile, you have something that has a medium return but very low complexity. You can get a quick win. That's something you've got to evaluate yourself and say, you know, it's better for me to do that or squeeze in two of those for one of the, you know, high value, high complexity return, right? So those things, we actually went through that exercise. And of course, leveraging the, you know, technology for agile development. So, if you think about breaking this down, not just from a BPM standpoint, but from a service-oriented architecture standpoint, you can look at the value chain, and you look at certain processes, and you do agile cycles for different sub-processes, right? So your value chain has different processes in its chain, and you can do different development cycles, but those teams that are doing those do have to have governance. They have to communicate and say, well, I'm at a certain point at this process, in my agile development, and so how does that map to a different life cycle? Because these might have started at different times, and they might have different endpoints, but they have at some point have to be able to interoperate with each other, right? So those are also important to have those governance checkpoints. And overall, again, being able to leverage the service-oriented architecture, business process management, knowledge management, E2O. So as a gentleman earlier today had mentioned that, different stakeholders in the design process need to be engaged and involved. So how do you share knowledge? You share it through a portal. You don't, here's some paperwork, right? That paper is done, right, in design time. You should be able to, in real time, have that collaboration in design time, not just in runtime, and be able to bring those systems together and different stakeholders together as well. So this is just some examples, what was built, they do, again, looking up pickles, other things. Content store as well, collections, etc. Being able to go all the way to shipping. So okay, I'm going to ship that thing out to the labs. And of course, the ability to have different interfaces, whether it be an iPhone or mobile device, etc. All vetted out. And we did that in a 90-day kind of rapid development agile extreme program cycle. And trust me, it was risky, right? But that's all about managing risk, right? And having that. And again, in that case, the Oracle employee I worked with, because she was more, lead developer, even though she had a lot of experience, she was actually relatively new to our Oracle platform. So she, of course, had a lot of support, but again, it is possible to do this with, resources that come on board and are new to this technology. Again, it's a trifecta people, process, technology. Not just technology, you also have to have the other people, processes in place. I think.
So with the time we have left, I'd like to show you a few different sort of examples of what yeah.
Can you do?
No, just go to the next. Okay. So, yeah, as you might imagine, I mean, we have customers across all kinds of industries, right? Doesn't matter. And of course, you see public sector here, and MEPCOM, U.S. MEPCOM, which is an interesting story in and of itself. I mean, you talk about the wins that are possible. They're responsible basically for recruitment for our services. And you can think about their processes. Their processes existed for hundreds of years. Right? Certainly, they've changed somewhat over the time, but this isn't like this is a new process. Yet, they were paper-based in a lot of areas. They had zero visibility. It would take weeks to do a query. And they moved basically to doing this with process management and had a phenomenal sort of turnaround with it in terms of minutes from weeks, as well as tremendous sort of return on investment. They actually won an award last year for return on investment. And they'd only done one of their small service branches at that point. All right, so transportation, energy, all these different industries. Let's move into some of the successes specifically. So let's talk about some of the tactical things, right? Certainly regulations are one of the things that come across. Sometimes order management, just is too error prone, or maybe there's a process that just runs occasionally, but yet, if you think about HR processes once a year, it's occasional, but boy, it takes some cycles when it runs, right? Or if there's just basically an efficient process that really has impact. So here's a financial services provider, basically, that needed to comply with new regulations. And, using it the way we talked about, essentially, and this is with an SOA environment, right, as you see under solution here, they're able to, save on just their approach to solving the problem. When they looked at doing it with traditional development versus doing it with BPM, it was 30% less in terms of cost, right? As well as providing, a scalable sort of solution that, in the future would support growth easier and would support change for that. And, for them, it helped them basically shift personnel to other tasks, by moving basically 40% of their resources otherwise. So both in time, money, visibility, great win here. Okay, so here's another one with regulation. Here's telecom, and this was about basically the change request, keep your number, change your long distance carrier thing, right? And this is something that was labor intensive, as you see, 25 employees, 3 different systems, lots of backlog. But with the change in the law, and they had to be able to do this much more efficiently, they used BPM to do this. Going basically from customer service staff of 25 to 3. Right? That's pretty dramatic right there. They had 15,000 backlog requests that had built up while they're basically doing this as people started to want to do this with the change in the law. And now basically 80% are handled automatically, and the rest takes some manual involvement with the 3 people. This solution was implemented in 2 months. Right? We talked a little bit about time frame here earlier. How long does it take, basically? Right? And so this is a pretty focused problem, right? But focused problems, whether they're tactical or what have you, can be quite costly and quite, get in the way of all kinds of other things. That's what I encourage you to find, right? And along the way, you build the experience, you build basically the, internal goodwill that this stuff has value to do then things further, along. Okay, here's an energy company, right? And this is basically all about ERP. You manage ERP, maybe you merge with another company or organization. Now you got 2 ERP systems. Things just kind of get out of hand naturally. And so their ERP sort of, process, as far as basically, managing orders was cumbersome. They had a lot of inaccuracies due to the manual aspect of it. Visibility suffered, right? So using BPM, plus turnover, right? People got fed up. It wasn't a high satisfaction job, right? I mean, it's the least of your worries, but it certainly has its impact, right? So using, go back a sec. So using, essentially BPM, they were able to come up with a solution in 5 weeks. Okay, again, that's a pretty short turnaround, right? Integrating this with SAP. Their training of these people was reduced from months to days, right? And basically, they were able to lower their operating costs and reap all the other benefits that you might associate with them. Okay. Okay, so here's basically another interesting one, basically a seasonal process. This is around essentially performance appraisal, right? Once a year, you got to do the performance appraisal thing. But this is a pretty large organization with over 3 million members, right? Again, they were able to do this in less than 60 days. Right? And this is, basically collaborating with this document. This is, document-centric BPM, if you will, right? Across all levels of the organization. Their audit process then was reduced, to days from weeks, right? And, it just enabled more success based on being able to do this correctly and do it efficiently. But that, that's a pretty dramatic change, I think, for them. Okay, and then inefficient process, right? So here's a manufacturer, right? Basically, looking at, warranty management, and how they sort of manage that whole process and the visibility that was required there. Using BPEL, that aspect of it, they were able to implement in 3 months, right? Introduce, greater self-service. And what's interesting about this particular one is that, certainly they have the efficiency around, manual errors in, being reduced, right? And also the manpower aspect, but by preventive maintenance, by offering basically a more efficient sort of solution for customers to be able to do preventive maintenance, they were able to save, what they're quoting as basically $2 million annually. right? Because if you deferred, you didn't do the maintenance, and you ran into a problem, it was very expensive. Okay, so lots of interesting stuff here. Okay, here's basically extending the application, right? This one's basically about approvals, so accounts payable and doing this essentially with BPM. Transaction costs reduced by 80%, realized ROI of 300% over 2 years. Reduced staff from 40 to 5, right? Save lots of outsourcing costs. Great ROI. If ROI is what folks measure, BPM is a great way to basically authenticate that. We had talked a little bit about this before. We did a survey a couple of years back to look at how long it took customers to deploy BPM, and this was in their first sort of instance. So there's learning and the rest of the stuff associated with it. And interestingly, this big red slice up here is 1 to 3 months, right? And that's 23%. So, we saw in a number of those examples, weeks, right? And then 4 to 6 months was 40%. If you look at these combined, that's 63%, more than half, in 6 months or less. And that's pretty good success, I think, here, that, talks to what BPM can do for you, right? Many variables, right, get thrown up in the air. What's the process? How complex, right, as Linus had mentioned before. But choosing the right process and the right approach will get you there quickly. Yes? It varied. I mean, this was done through a survey over the web. So, this was the customer responding. I'd say, what's your guess at how many percentage of, deployments our services or other services get involved with?
Yeah. So I would say that, our services team, is a relatively small team. We're not like other vendors that have a huge services arm. We do have what we call special forces, right? So they get inserted, if necessary, into deployment. We do have a lot of integrators that then use our technology as well. But then we do also have customers that have their own IT. So I think that I would say that it's, like you said, a blend of those three as far as that goes. I think that what's important, though, is that we also provide certification training, and we also provide, at public sector anyway, free workshops on our technology. So that's to our customers, to our partners. We provide that at our resident office. Those don't take over certification. Those are just to get you jump started in technology, but they are hands-on, 2-day hands-on workshops. And so as far as a blend goes, I think you would say it's all of those, but to take advantage of what Oracle has to offer, because we are a relatively large company that can do those type of offerings, and we do provide that charge in certain cases workshops. I would say, though, that what's especially important is not just knowing the technology, but actually having, I think it's essential to have, form at least concept of center of excellence. So it should have both committed resources and project related. What that means is you have a center of excellence, you have a core set of people. This is consistently across all of the government customers that I work with, and in the past, actually, I did commercial and government internationally, is that there is at least a core, that you do have a stakeholder, and you would say component, sponsor within the organization that has enough power or juice that can get consensus from both IT and business. Okay, whoever that is, somebody, and you have a core set of resources that will stay with the program, not just project, on an ongoing basis. So that's your core, your center of excellence. Then you would then add to that functional experts that go with each project that are specific to the project. Those are subject matter experts, functional experts that either are a business analyst role or subject matter expert role or both, that are involved per project. And then as far as infrastructure goes, you may have to have, again, resources that are attached on a case-by-case basis from the technology group. Because, for instance, if you got to integrate with a PeopleSoft, you're not going to get them full time. But you need to budget for them to be on the project when you need them, when you're doing the integration required. Or the database, the DBA. I mean, DBA just sets things up, but DBA is not going to turn over the keys to their database, right? They're not going to say, here's the, administrator password, log it, go have at it. No, they're not going to do that, right? So those have to be budgeted in and agreed upon, saying, look, we are going to pull from you. It's not going to be on, a full-time basis, but when required, we're going to ask for your assistance when we're doing that kind of thing. So those would be kind of the things you would look for.
And the role that Oracle plays in there can be any piece of them, but generally, we'll do, I would say, a lot of the lead stuff, sort of the top level stuff, and because then it's like a mentoring exercise as well. Basically help people move forward with.
So just to give you like maybe a perspective on the whole spectrum. Another customer, U.S. Marine Corps, Global Combat Service Support. They've won several awards. They're their logistics systems. You know what they do, right? They go to war, right? So they're end to end. They're using our e-business with our BPL and SOA capabilities. They won several awards recently, including the CIO 100 award and AIM awards. That has a big Oracle services component, but keep in mind that's a huge. That's like 10-year, how much money project, where it's very much, all, e-business plus everything else, and it's, forward to the battlefield, very complex application. And so they decided, in their case, to invest in that. Not to say they don't have subcontractors that are integrated. Or you could have, we have some state and local that have purely internal resources, and they sub sometimes to Oracle Consulting or some other integrator on a case-by-case basis for specific requirements. We have a lot of those as well. So you can have that gambit of, do you want to engage with Oracle Consulting? You can. Or you can actually have your own resources with just piecemeal requirements. You call either us or an integrator to do that. So there is kind of that spectrum that you can.
Yeah, we want to, make sure you're successful, but certainly at a level of that's comfortable for you, and we're not looking to build in dependency on our service. Right? It doesn't scale. Partly why we view as a unique strength in our product that it's integrated. It's going to make it easy. Another question? In operation, it means, yeah. Well, the way I interpret it basically from the survey was, that it's from when they have an identified project, and, now they're basically, okay, how do we address it? Right. And so, you've got to, from that point, you got to do your as-is analysis. You got to know what you got, right? And which, by the way, we found another best practice. Companies will replicate the current process, the as-in BPM, and along the way, they're going to learn all these things that could be done better, right? But from that point, move on. Okay. All right. Well, we're just about out of time here. Actually, why don't you go to the best practices there? And I think you've actually covered. So we'll be reinforcing each other here a little bit. The right process is really key. So, you're looking at, again, complexity versus value, right? And the value's got to be identifiable by the business because, they need to come on board here. We have these roundtables sometimes around BPM, and it's a small group, and, we have people that have done it, people that are just getting into it, and it's basically just an extended conversation. And one of those, we had, one group that was talking about doing it to get their feet wet. Basically, they were going to automate, trouble ticket stuff in IT. And I didn't even have to say anything, but the other guys at the table who had done with it before said, no, 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 no. You don't want to do that because who gets the benefit? Business is not going to see that as anything different, right? Really needs to be something that they value, because if they do, then they're going to get the value of BPM, and that's going to build into being able to do the next stage or another project. So finding value that the business associates with it is key versus the complexity. Right? Integrating with one system, 5 systems, 20 systems, et cetera. Quick and early wins. This is basically what we were talking about earlier. I think business and user buy-in certainly is key. We talked about that, and also how that other company I mentioned met with business sort of on a daily basis. Governance is much or as little as you need, but you got to have it there from the start. Otherwise, you don't have sort of an understanding of what change really is going to involve. We've seen that happen too. Executive sponsorship. That's one of these things that it just goes without saying, but you probably all have seen projects in your career where you didn't have it or somebody didn't have it, and it's just so key with this, because BPM is all about change management. Right? You're going to make changes, and it's good to put people in their uncomfortable, situations. So you need it from the top, rather than for you trying to convince people, at that level. And then certainly defining KPIs, right, that matter, performance indicators. So defining them early, agreeing on them, and then showing basically how. So to sort of wrap up here, I think we've looked at a bunch of things basically within the market today, where BPM is going, right? What some of the challenges are, and what we believe they'll be for the future. But we think basically, for your benefit, certainly makes sense to pay attention to both the tactical and the strategic challenges that you see in your organization. And if you can address them basically, the tactical ones, it's a great way to roll out BPM incrementally and yet have that infrastructure for strategic change. BPM is also a great way to showcase any of the efforts you've done with SOA before, because now you have a great, way that to enable your back-end systems and things with services tying into business processes. It's a great way for the business to understand the investment you've made in SOA. And, lastly, no reason to wait. I mean, it's one of these things that, and I guess you, like I said earlier to begin with, you folks are all self-selected to come here. You're further down the process than many other people, right? In your organization. So I think it's great that you have that dedication to it. I certainly encourage you to take a look at our technology and spend some time with it. And one last thing, basically, next month in October, we have Oracle Open World